Okay, Mitzvah Hashem was starting a new, or maybe not so new, series of shiurim, but we would like to start Daf Yomi again. And Baruch Hashem, I was over the last couple of weeks to learn Daf Yomi through Rabbim, and we learned probably about 25 blot or so in Chulin, and we got up to Daf Kuf Dalet. We learned till the first blot of Kol Habasar, which is the 8th parak of Chulin. So today's daf is daf Kuv Hey in Chulin, which is, I believe, a very geshmaka agadata on Amud Beis. What I would like to do in this series of shiurim is, even though that it's going to be daf yomi and pretty much a regular daf yomi going through the Gemara, but I would also want to make notes as we're going along to the inyanim that we would, Mitzvah Hashem, like to speak out when we need to speak things out ba'arichos. Anyway, so just to jump right into things, we have here that the Gemara says, let's start from, it's about the 12 lines or so from the bottom, 10 lines or so from the bottom of Kuf Dalet Amud Beis. Tana Agra Chamud Reb Abba. Agra, who is the father-in-law of Reb Abba, learned in the Brisa. Now we know that the Ramami Panu says that Reb Abba is Rav. A Rav is Reb Abba. Reb Abba in the Zohar is Rav, who's the Rav Tanu Polik. It also remains to be seen. The birds, meaning chicken, and gvina is cheese, may be eaten together one after the other in a carefree manner. Rashi says, he can eat it in a derech hefker and doesn't need to be careful about it. I believe that there are other understandings of what apikarin means. Let's see, I don't see it here. Okay. I believe that there are some that say that apikarin means a certain type of cloth that they would eat it in, so it shouldn't make a mess. According to most Rishonim, the reason for this kula is based on the sheet of Rabbi Kiva, who says that eating birds together with milk, even if they've been cooked together itself, is only midrabanan, and the Chachamim did not enact any other takanas to be mechalik between the two. Okay. Hu tanila v'hu amala. Agra taught the Brisa, and he explained the Brisa as follows, meaning that his Rashi explains that he heard this Brisa from his Rebbeim, but they didn't explain it. So after he got the exact lashon of the Brisa, he explained it according to his own understanding. I guess it's interesting because Derech Klal, we don't say this when someone's mefarish a Brisa in the Gemara, that who pirish misvar shaloi, meaning that he explained it from his own svara of what it is. So who tani love who amar love alein tilas yadayim v'loy kinuach hapeh. That in apikarin means that the bird meat and the cheese may be eaten one after the other without washing one's hands and without wiping out the inside of the mouth in between. Meaning, if he had eaten milchiks and wanted to eat meat, he first has to wash his hands and clean out his mouth. Washing is necessary to make sure that there's no milchik stuck to his hands, and the cleaning out the mouth, meaning one should chew or eat a par of solid food and then swallow it or spit it out, which would then clean the mouth of any milchiks that's stuck inside, which is what we know from what we know. Okay, so the Yitzchak ben Misharshia, the son of Reb Misharshia, visited the home of Ravashi. Isolate vina ochal. They brought cheese for him, and he ate. Isolate bisra. They then brought meat for him to eat. Ochal b'lemashiyada. He ate, but he didn't wash his hands in between. Meaning, he ate the solid food in between to wipe out his mouth, but he didn't wash out his hands to make sure that his hands didn't have any milchiks on before he was going to take the fleishiks. So Amri Lei, they said to him, Vatani Agra Chamud Reb Abba Oifuk Vina Nachal Bapikarim. But Agra, the father-in-law of Reb Abba, the shver of Reb Abba, taught in the Brisa that Oifuk Vina could be eaten in a carefree manner without washing in between. So that means Oifuk Vina in, meaning that in a Chanami, bird meat, chicken or turkey or anything like that, and cheese may indeed be eaten without washing hands in between, Basuk Vina Light. But regular meat and cheese, so you have to wash your hands in between. So then why taka did you not wash your hands between the cheese and the meat? Amalu, said to them, Hani mili b'layla. This applies only at night when one can't see if his hands are dirty from the first dish that he ate. But by day, I can see my hands are clean, so no washing is necessary. Similarly, if a person is eating at night with a bright light, then one can see that his hands are clean, and no washing would be necessary. However, the Torah brings from Rabbeinu Paratz that a person should nevertheless wash his hands even during the day, since sometimes there could be some residue stuck to his hands, and he may not be aware of it. And the Shach says that is taka what we should do. Now, if a person uses a fork and a knife, and he never came into actual contact with the cheese, then one wouldn't have to wash his hands, and that's what's mashma from Kama Achrayim. However, other poskim say that one needs to wash his hands even in this case. We learned in the Brisa regarding cheese and meat. Beis Shammai say that if one has eaten cheese mekaneach, he must wipe out the inside of his mouth with the power of food before he eats the meat. Beis Hillel Amrim mediach, he must rinse out the inside of his mouth. Mediach, the Ran learns that mediach means to wash his hands. Rashi certainly agrees he's mechuyev to wash his hands between cheese and meat, as we saw in the previous Gemara, but he maintains that this brisa is discussing only the cleansing of the mouth and not the hands. So, frankly, Gemara, now what does the brisa mean when it says that Beis Shammai say he must wipe? And what does it mean when Beis Hillel say that he must rinse? Zakti Gemara, Kufheyom and Aleph. If he'll say that this is what it means, that Beis Shammai say mekaneach v'lo boi mediach, he wipes the inside of his mouth between the milchiks and the fleshings, and he doesn't need a rinse. Meaning that Beis Shammai say that wiping out the inside of the mouth with solid food is effective in cleaning out the mouth, but rinsing with the liquid doesn't work. So they say that the Chachamim were only misakin mekaneach, but not mediach. The Chachamim could have made no mention of mediach with respect to this halacha, since it's not going to work. Beis Hillel say mediach lebei mekaneach. He rinses the inside of his mouth between the milchiks and fleshings, and he doesn't need to wipe it out. Meaning, Beis Hillel hold the opposite. The rinsing out the inside of the mouth with the liquid is effective in cleaning out the mouth, but wiping out the inside of the mouth with food is not good. So the Chachamim were masakan mediach, which is sufficient on its own. But then that which Reb Zera said, that wiping out the inside of the mouth can be performed only with bread, according to whom does Reb Zera say that? Obviously, it has to be that he said it according to Beis Shammai, because there's no other way to understand it. Meaning that the only way to do it is by eating bread after eating milchiks to clean out the mouth from the cheese that's in the mouth. But eating other items doesn't wipe away the cheese that's in there, and a person would be usher to eat meat unless he eats bread. So Ella, this is how you have to understand the brisa. He has to wipe out the inside of his mouth between courses, meaning between the milchiks and the fleshings, and he doesn't need to rinse out his mouth. He needs to also rinse his mouth. And this cannot be either, because that would end up being mikule havale mikule Beis Shammai umrei chumer Beis Hillel. Then this machlekes would be one of the kulas of Beis Shammai and the chumras of Beis Hillel. If Beis Shammai holds that only wiping is required, while Beis Hillel holds that you need to do mekaneach and mediach. So Zakti Gemara v'lisnei gavi kula Beis Shammai v'chumei Beis Hillel. So then we should teach it among the other kulas of Beis Shammai and the chumras of Beis Hillel that are mentioned in Masechta Eidos. As we mentioned before, it was actually in the previous Amud, Beis Hillel usually are more mekel than the machlekes with Beis Shammai. In Parak Daled and Hev Eidos, there the Mishnayos go through many different cases where there's machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and Lamaisa were noig, meaning that there are kulei Beis Shammai and chumrei Beis Hillel. So if the pshat is that this machlekes is the way that we're explaining it, then it should have been mentioned there. Zakti Gemara Ella, we must learn the brisa as follows: Beis Shammai emir mekaneach, he has to wipe the inside of his mouth after eating milchiks before he eats meat, and he also must rinse. Beis Hillel emir mediach mekaneach, he has to wash out his mouth, and he also has to clean his mouth. So both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel say he must do both. Mara marchada v'loi pligi. They both say the same thing, and they do not disagree. Meaning both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that both wiping the mouth with solid food and rinsing the mouth with a liquid are necessary to remove the cheese from the mouth. They agree that cleaning the mouth is a two-step process, and neither one is good by itself. And Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel each meant to teach one side of this process. Very interesting. Lamaisa, we're takanoik to do this, but let's see weiter in the Gemara, and maybe this will be one of the things that we'll get back to. Gufa, we learned Reb Zera said ein kinuach hapeh el b'pas, wiping at the inside of the mouth can only be done with bread. This applies only to wheat. bread that's made out of wheat. But the sarale, but barley bread is not effective. When barley bread is eaten, it crumbles into small pieces inside the mouth and doesn't stick together, so it won't help. Or the and that's only if the bread is cold. Mishtar shatri, with respect to hot bread, hot wheat bread, it sticks to the palate and doesn't clean the mouth of the cheese. Meaning it becomes soft and sticky and therefore it sticks. And I guess it doesn't stick enough to unstick the cheese that might be there. And also it has to be that the bread is soft, but if it's crunchy, hard bread, it's not going to work. Bread is too hard, like the barley that we mentioned before, it crumbles into small pieces and doesn't have the effect that we need. The kinuach can be done with anything, except for flour, dates, and vegetables. Since they're soft and therefore sticky, apparently it's cooked vegetables or green leafy growths that are all soft. Okay. Rav Asi asked the following Shaila from Rav Yechanan. How long must one wait between eating meat and cheese? Meaning he ate meat first and then wants to eat cheese afterwards. As he's like Rashi. Nothing. Ain't affecting Gemara. Is that true? But Rav Chisda said if a person ate meat, to us if him to eat cheese afterwards. If he ate cheese, he's more to eat cheese afterwards. The Gemara says that we have to be musak in the girsa of this ma'asav here. Rather, the shaila that Rav Asi asked Rav Yechanan was how long must one wait between eating cheese and meat? Meaning, ate cheese first. So Taka says over there nothing at all because the taste of milchigs doesn't stick around in the mouth as long as meat does. However, in the Isser Heta Aruch, he says a possible exception that cheeses that are aged 6 months or more, these cheeses are very fatty, and Taka causes the taste to stay in the mouth a lot longer than regular cheese. The Ramah says in Simon Peites that the minhag is to follow this shita. Although he says that some poskim are mekel, he concludes that it's worthwhile to be machmer. The Beis Yosef in Kufay and Gimel brings a zayir and shmos that you're not allowed to eat milchigs and fleishigs, even chicken, in the same meal or the same hour. And the Beis Yosef says that a person should try to be machmer in the zayir if he can. Gufa amrav chista chal basar asalachal gvina gvina mutalachal basar. Gufa, let's get back to what we said. Rav Chisda said that if a person ate meat, he's forbidden to eat cheese afterwards. But if he eats cheese, he's mutter to eat meat afterwards. Amalei Rav Yosef Rav Chisda. Rav Yosef said to Rav Chisda, basar shmeina shnayim. What's Allah with the meat that's stuck between the teeth? Do we look at it like meat, so that a person is not allowed to eat cheese until he removes it, or we say that this meat is so little that it's no longer the normal form? Should it be considered as if we're, part of the body, or just like nothing, similar to what we had at the end of the 7th parak, b'negeya, eating the little pieces of Avram and Achai. Kari alei habasar then ben shnei. Rav Chisda said the following pasuk regarding the shaila: the meat was still between the teeth, so the meat between that's still stuck between the teeth is still called meat. And what's this pasuk talking about? It's and it becomes a shaila. And this pasuk is, I believe, by the Parshas Paloischa, with the when they wanted the slav and they were complaining about the food in the midbar. So Abbas said, "Then shinei." It's a big shaila in Rishonim if you have the meat stuck between the teeth. So the Torah and Simon Peitas says that according to the shita that Rashi brings, one would have to remove the meat between the teeth, even if one already waited 6 hours after eating the meat, and he must also wipe and rinse his mouth. But others are chaylik. Rambam says that the taste of meat doesn't stick around. Instead, the purpose of waiting is to make sure that any meat that's still stuck in the teeth after 6 hours, those slivers of meat have decomposed sufficiently so that they're no longer of any halachic concern. And about the point of why you have to wash out your mouth and eat things, is to take care of all that meat that's stuck between the teeth. Marukva said, with respect to the following matter, I'm like vinegar, the son of wine, compared to my father. Meaning my relationship in this matter to my father can be compared to wine that turned into vinegar, just as vinegar is wine that went bad. So too, I am inferior in chasidus and tzidkus, my father, with regard to this mattered. Ilu Abba Keva Ochel Bisra Idna. For my father, when he ate meat, now they have Ochel Kvina Ad Lamachar Kiyashta. My father wouldn't eat meat for another 24, wouldn't eat milchigs until the same time tomorrow. I mean, he would wait a full 24 hours between fleishigs and milchigs. When I eat meat, I only eat it with this meal, that I don't eat cheese. But with the next meal, I will eat cheese. Meaning my father went beyond the letter of the law, and he went lifting Mishur Sadin, and after eating fleishigs, he waited more than the halachically required time period before eating milchigs. I, however, I'm less of a tzaddik than my father. I do not go beyond the letter of the law, and I wait only the halachic required time, and not more than that. Now the Gemara doesn't say how long the period was between his meals. However, many Rishonim say that this was 6 hours. The reason is as follows. In times of the Gemara, people ate 2 meals a day, one in the morning and one in the evening, and the exact time for the morning meal differed according to one's job, as the Gemara Shabbos on Daf Yud and Psachim Daf Yud Aleph, so speak out. And the evening meal was eaten by all at the end of the workday, starting from at around 6 p.m. So as was mentioned in the Gemara Shabbos, Talmidei Chachamim ate the Sudas Habayker, they ate breakfast during the 6th hour of the day, meaning from 11 a.m. until noon. Accordingly, Mar Ukva's 2 Sudas were 6 hours apart. Now, obviously, you're going to have to figure out how it works between the summer Zmanim and the winter Zmanim. Shoyz Zmaniyos, not Shoyz Zmaniyos. When Taisus, however, learns Mamish, not like that. Zakt Taisus, Sudasa Achrita Chilna, that Lava Sudasa Shurikil Lasas Achushach Zachas Arbis, Alafilu Lealtim, Sil Kashulchan, Abrech Mutad Leplugrapana. Once it's not in the same meal, as soon as he benched, then the Masalik Shulchan, which means that they took away the table, which was the derech of how they would make Sudas in those days, he would even eat milchigs by the next Suda, and it would be a non-issue. Obviously, there's a lot over here to discuss, which we're not going to do now. We're going weiter. Omar Shmuel. Shmuel says, I too am like vinegar, the son of wine, compared to my father. Meaning, I'm not as machmir as my father was. My father went lifnei Mishur Sadin, and I didn't. My father would scrutinize his properties twice a day to see what needed to be tended to, and I only check up on my fields and my properties once a day. It's very interesting what this is referring to, lahalacha, meaning what's the difference if I want my, let's say I have a property, and let's say, I don't know, it's a little bit nachilas, it's not so taken care of. Let's say, well, what's the big deal? What's the difference? But many Achrayim learn over here that there's a real din that a person has to be careful not to neglect his properties and needs to take care of that. The many Rishonim hold that it's a real thing to be able to, that a person has to go taking care of his property to see what it needs. The Yamshel Shlema says that a person needs to be careful that his properties don't get ruined, so he doesn't fall into anius, and he should not have to rely on other people for parnasa. And it's one of the basics of Derech Eretz, which is Derech Eretz Kodma LaTorah. And the Shlo describes this as seeing to it that what Hashem has given a person is preserved and safe from damage. The Shlo notes that our Gemara is speaking about agricultural properties. We could also learn a shtickle Musa Haskell from our Gemara that a person should be responsible for all their things, if not daily, then at least once a month. A person should always take inventory to see what's going on and all his business dealings, and you should do what he can to try to save money, so you shouldn't suffer any financial collapse. The Maral says that it's not a person's own effort to preserve his property, but rather if Hashem sees that a person protects and attends to the things that the pikdainu, so to speak, that Hashem gives him, Hashem protects him and attends to them as well. Shmuel Taimei. This is Shmuel Lushitasai. The Omar Shmuel says, "Man desai nifse kol yom mashkach astira." A person who checks out his properties every day will find an astira. What's an astira? Rashi says, he ends up with more money because he takes care of all the minor repairs, but that are necessary before serious damage happens. Astira is a certain type of coin which is made from pure, a sela is made out of pure silver, but this was, part silver, part other metals. But the point is that, I think you learn Kipshuta, that a person just constantly walking around will find things that he's looking for. But even if not, even if it means more Kipshuta, like we're saying, that whole save money, that's also a good thing. Abaya have a sign next to Kol Yom V'Yoma. Abaya would check his properties every single day. One day he came across his sharecropper as he was carrying a bundle of wood that he was stealing from Abaya's field. Amalei Hani Lehecha says, "Where are you taking them?" Amalei Lebeimar, I'm taking them to your house. Amalei Kvar Kadmucha Rabbanon, the Chachamim have already anticipated you and your dishonest ways. Why? Meaning, always check up on the workers, because here we had a worker that was marching around, and he was taking things, and that's also part of the cheshbon over here to protect. The Chachamim's hakon over here was to protect people from stealing by teaching that a person should check on his properties every day. Ravasi would check out his properties every day. What happened to all those astiros which Shmuel spoke about? Meaning he never discovered anything of importance. He was wondering whether it was worth all the effort of checking the fields every day. One day, as he was checking out his properties, he saw a stream of water coming out of a crack in a canal, the water from irrigation canal, which, as we know from Katan and other places that they would have in Bava Basra, they would have irrigation ditches running through their properties. The water was flowing out of the canal through a crack in its wall and was threatening to flood his land and ruin all the produce. Ravasi took off his shirt or his jacket, rolled it up and stuffed it in the crack to stop the water from flowing out. Ramakala, he then shouted for help. The plumbers came and sealed up the canal, sparing his produce. Omar Ashkachtinu Lukulu Istiru de Shmuel. He said, I found all the astiris of Shmuel, because he said that Shmuel says that a person who checks his properties daily will find an astira. He didn't mean that he'll find the benefit every day necessarily. Rather, the daily inspections lead one to prevent a single loss, and you'll fix things as soon as possible, and you wouldn't wait until things get worse. Okay, very Geshmaka, interesting Gemara. I believe this is elsewhere. It's also maybe it's in Tainus. Okay. Dr. Gemara weiter, back to the sugya that we're talking about, washing hands before eating milchiks and fleishiks. Rabbi Barav and Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ashiyon. Rabbi Barav said in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ashiyon, "My Rishon mitzvah. You wash your hands before eating bread is a mitzvah, which was a takana from Shlomo HaMelech. My Rishon mitzvah v'achronim chayva. The my achronim, which we wash our hands at the end of a suda before because hamazon, before benching, arachi of to wash off the residue accumulated on the hands during the meal. The word chayva and mitzvah are close to meaning, but to indicate a chiyuv in a different degree. Chayva signifies somewhat greater chiyuv than a mitzvah. The Gemara will explain why ma'adim achreinim is so important. Ayin brachas tafnun gimel amid beis for more of the sugya. The Brisa says that the first and last waters are a chiyuv, but the middle waters are rishos. So what are we talking about over here? What do you mean middle waters? What are mayim emsoyim? So we'll see in a little bit. Zok the Gemara like this: mitzvah l'gabe rishos, chayv karila. In fact, the mayim rishayim are not actually a chiyuv, but merely a mitzvah. So speaking of waters, of washing the hands that are a mitzvah relative to waters that are optional, the Tana refers to them as a chayva. Meaning that when the Tana of the Brisa mentions the mayim rishayim chayva, he's concerned only differentiating between washing that one must do and washing that if he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to. I mean, you don't have to wash, but if you want to eat bread, then you have to wash, and if you're benching, then you have to wash. So that's the difference between chayva and a mitzvah gufa. Let's go back to what we said. The first and last waters are achiv emsoyim rishus. The middle waters are optional. The Rishonim can be poured into a kli or onto the ground. The last waters may be poured over one's hands only into a kli. The cannot be poured onto the ground. What's the difference? There's an issue between them, the case of washing over wood chips. According to the first member that we said that may be poured over one's hands only into a kli, washing over wood chips is usher, since the wood chips are not a kli. According to the second one, the mayim would not be poured over one's hand onto the ground. Washing over wood chips would be mutter. Sounds very similar to what we were talking about, behilchus kisui hadam. Mayim rishayim may be used with hot water or cold water. The mayim must be used only cold water, because hot water moisturizes the hands with the greasy matter on one's fingers, which we had not that long ago in Parakid Hanosha. But does not actually remove the greasy stuff from your fingers. It's interesting. Today they tell you that they only use hot water, but I guess the soap is what helps us remove it, not the hot water itself. The Gemara is saying that the hot water doesn't help remove the zuhama. The Brisa says that mayim rishayim could be used with either hot water and or cold water. Amr Rabbi Yosef, Amr Rabbi Yana. Rabbi Yosef said in Rabbi Yana, Lashanu Elosh Ein Hayaz, they taught that one may use hot water for the mayim rishayim only with water that's not too hot, that the hand wouldn't get scalded by it. If the hand gets scalded by it, that you pull your hand away, then you can't use that even for mayim rishayim. And those that teach that Rabbi Yana's statement refers to the end of the above brisa, that the last waters may be poured using only cold water. This implies one may not use hot water for the last waters. And Rabbi Yosef said, in the name of Rabbi Yana, they taught that one is forbidden to use hot water only when it's so hot that he would pull his hand away, it would be scalded by it. But if that water is not so hot that the hand would get scalded by it, so then the mayim may be poured using it. Michlal. So since we have defined what hot water is as Yaseh Ladas, and since the beginning of the Brisa says that you may use hot water for mayim rishayim, it follows like this: the rishayim aval pisha Yaseh Ladas ben mutter. That it's mutter to use mayim rishayim with something that is Yaseh Ladas ben. And Msayim rishus. Okay. The Gemara goes right there to say that the middle waters are rishus. Amar Rav Nachman said, "Lashanu el ben tafshil tafshil." This is taught only in a geya, washing between one course and another course during the meal, meaning both of meat or both of this is just for cleanliness, and this is not necessarily a halacha thing. But between meat and milchiks and fleishiks, or fleishiks and milchiks and fleishiks, it's going to be a chiyuv. Rabbi Yehuda said, why did the Chachamim say that mayim achreinim is an obligation? Because there's a substance known as melech sudomis that blinds the eyes. Since some melech sudomis may be mixing with the salt that a person uses at his table, the Chachamim were concerned that a person may rub his eyes and cause damage by mistake to his eyes, so you have to wash your hands so that the stuff doesn't get into your eyes. Let's see. Rashi Shemelch Sedaimis ve'Amru Chachamim. The Chachamim say to Gemara Brachos, Al Kol Achilascha Achar Melach, and all your food you should put salt. If came in the Nagab Melach, once he touches the salt, Ki Hadu Yob Yoda Einayim Mesamalahu Lefikach Tzarich Linatlan. And once a person touches his hands, the salt touches his hands, he might touch his eyes, and it could damage his eyes. That's why he needs to wash his hands. Rashi Menachos says that Melech Sedaimis came from the shores of the sea, which probably means the Dead Sea, which is where Sedaim was. It's not clear what made the Melech Sedaimis so dangerous to the eye. Modern day Dead Sea salt does contain higher concentrations of potassium, magnesium, calcium, chlorides, as well as sulfur, iodine, and bromides, and they actually do caution their customers to strongly not get the salt in their eyes. So that may be Melech Sedaimis, what we're talking about here in the Gemara. Okay, and Rashi in Beya, and the Flamet Test speaks out that the Melech Sedaimis was ground up much better than other salt. So the concern here is that there may be little pieces which normally you wouldn't be able to notice, and they'll eventually come to contact with the person's eyes and do damage. Okay, it's a big sugya. There's a lot here to see on this also. This harmful salt is found only in the concentration of 1 grain per kur of ordinary salt, which is a very, very huge amount. Occurs a measure of a volume equal to 30 sa, the equivalent of 4,320 baits of eggs. Amalei Ravacha read Rav Ravashi. Ravacha, the son of Rava, said to Ravashi, "Kol melchamai upon measured salt. What's the halacha? Must he also wash his hands, or it's dafka somebody who ate a suda?" Amalei let me point. There's no question about that. Anybody who deals with this kind of salt must definitely wash his hands afterwards. Amar Abaya says, initially I used to say that the reason we don't wash our hands of the ground for my machrayim mishum zuamos is because the water is dirty and you get all kinds of icky things on the floor. Since my machrayim wash the food off the hands, the water will eventually spoil and will be very smelly and kaviyaki. So, I mean, it's like we said before that a person should wash his hands the kinsa on the wood chips. Amar Limar, but the Rebbe, my Rabba told me, because evil spirit rests on them when they lie on the ground, which could cause harm to a person who walks over that spot. Initially, I used to say, the reason why a person doesn't take anything from the table when another person seated at the table is drinking from his cup is added concern because perhaps some mishap will occur at the meal. He may choke on his drink. Meaning that while he's drinking, he'll notice that the item is being taken from in front of him, and he'll want to take that piece of cake or something for himself, and he may become upset and try to talk and then cough and choke on what he's drinking. But the Rebbe Megisog that Mishum the Kasha L'Ruach Tzarda is because it can trigger the spirit of Tzarda. What's that? That's an evil spirit that causes the clouding of the mind, or it's a Ruach Ra that causes have a headache or a dislocation of the muscles in the face. Okay, the Rabbeinu Gershom says it's interesting stuff over here, like we said. A lot of interesting I got it here, and the plan is to hopefully get back to it and learn it via Stavshasai. This was said only when a person takes the item off the table and doesn't bring it back to the person's place. But if a person takes it and then brings it back, it's no problem. And this was also stated only where the item is taken further than Dalad Amos away from the table. But if it's within 4 Amos, it's not an issue. And also this is only said regarding to an item that's needed for the Suda. And this was only if one wants to remove an item that's not needed for the meal, there is no issue. Mar Baravashi was careful not to remove from the table even a mortar or pestle used for grinding spices, for that too is an item needed for the meal. Interesting that it was actually on this table b'shas the Suda and didn't prepare it on the counter like we spoke in the previous Gemara. Initially, is to think, the reason why we gather the breadcrumbs from under the table, Mishum Nakirusa, is because of cleanliness. Let's see, Rabbeinu Gershom over here. When you want to just keep things clean under your house. But the rabbit Megazog, Mishum the Kashi Lana Yusuf, because leaving crumbs on the floor can trigger poverty. As we'll see later, but the Gemara says that a person who leaves crumbs on the floor and people step on them, he gets gechapt by the malach, the malach of Anius, as we'll see more about. The Gemara Pesachim Kufyat Aleph and Beis says that the name of the malach of Parnasa is naked, cleanliness. Therefore, he doesn't approve of crumbs being thrown in places where they'll be stepped on. And the name of the malach that's in charge of Anius is called Naval, which means filth. He enters into houses where they don't handle bread with proper cleanliness, and he likes dirty places. Sefer Hasidim says that when the malach of Anius sees people stepping on crumbs, remaining from a person who doesn't eat neatly, he says, after this person has stuffed his stomach, he tramples the leftovers. If he owned everything in the world, he would ruin it all. And the malach therefore punishes him with Anius, which is very interesting in the Gemara and Brachas on the Avav. The Gemara is talking about Shedim and the like. I saw it in a Sefer, I think it was a Breslover Sefer, I think it's called Chodesh Veshmai or something like that. Chodesh Veshmai, that Ha'ara, I don't remember B'Shem who, but you'll see that by all the tzaddikim and the gedolim, not all of them, there's a lot of cleanliness, kpeda almost on cleanliness. Even if it's not looking out right, kpeda, but you see how careful they are to keep clean. There was a person who did the administering malach of poverty was trying to chap, but he wasn't able to chap him because he was very careful with respect to leaving crumbs on the floor. One day he was eating bread on grass. Now the malach said, after he ate, he brought a shovel, he cut up the grass together with the crumbs and threw them into the river. He then heard the malach saying, "Woe to me, for he has forced me out of his home," meaning because he couldn't do anything to him because he was beaten by this fellow. Very interesting. It comes by the Chassidus Rabbis. They're very busy with this, but I don't know why I need to come on to big rabbis. It's a Beferish Gemara. We definitely saw by big rabbis, and we definitely saw by big people that they collect the crumbs and they eat it. The point isn't to eat the crumbs. The point is that there shouldn't be crumbs left on the floor. Initially, I used to say, the reason why people don't drink the foam that surfaces on the top of the beverages, because it's disgusting, people don't like it. But my Rebbe, the kashi le karsam, it can cause karsam. What's karsam? Some have the girsa garsam. It's an illness that causes the inflammation to the mucous membrane of the head, which results in the secretion of mucus through the nostrils. Or it's in inflammation, according to the Aruch, it's an inflammation of the fluid-producing membrane that envelops the lungs, so you shouldn't drink that. I believe that this is also Igamar in Psachim as well. That's why people don't drink the foam on top of the beer. I guess you should be careful about that. Mishtei karsha lekarsam, drinking foam triggers this mucous membrane. Minfach by kasha l'reisha, blowing into it triggers illnesses of the head. Midache kasha l'anyusa, pushing it to the side with one's hand triggers anyus. Maitakante, how do you be masak in the foam on top of the beverage to be able to drink it? L'shake shakue, one needs to let it sink into the beverage on its own, and I guess don't stick your finger into it and don't blow it. L'karsam, the chamar shichra, the antidote for a person who suffers from karsam as a result of drinking foam of wine is to drink beer, the shichra maya. And the antidote for a person who's suffering from karsam because of beer is to drink water, the maya lasa takanta, but a person who is suffering from karsam from drinking the foam of water, there's no refuah, meaning I guess from seltzer, meaning that the bottom line is seltzer, and this is the illustration of that which people say, Basa anya, azla ani yusa, poverty follows the poor. This poor man who had only water to drink has no refuah for his sickness. Okay, interesting thing. I don't know what to do about these things. Let's just see what the Gemara says. Initially used to say that the reason people don't eat vegetables directly from the bundle, tired by the garden or mission of domestic crops and uses, because it appears to be like dressing. But the Rebbe to make a zog, the kashi like shafim, because it triggers somebody to be susceptible to shafim, witchcraft. The one who sees him doing this will be able to do witchcraft on him. On the other hand, if one is careful not to pull out vegetables from the tight bundle, it's difficult for witchcraft to have an effect on him. What's the shmusir b'chlal? I know that some people will say that it has to do with the fact that things are tied together, but I don't know. Rav Chisda v'Rabba Baravuna v'Kazli v'Arba. Rav Chisda and Rabba Baravuna were traveling on a boat. Amalu Etrim Ahi Matronisa, a certain noble woman said to them, "Seat me together with you on the boat." They didn't seat her together on the boat. Amr Milsa, she said some kind of magic spell. Asar Tali Arba. She immobilized the boat. The spell held the boat stationary and didn't allow it to move. Amr Ina Milsa, they said something else to counteract the which got Sharyua, and it made the boat move on. Milsa is Rishit Tevis, Mechashefa Lai Sechaya. Interesting. Okay. Amr Lahu, so she said to them, what can I do to you? You don't wipe yourselves with a klicheres. You don't kill a louse while it's still in your clothing. And you don't pull out and eat vegetables from the bundle that the gardener has tied. Meaning that basically she was saying that because you follow certain things, she was powerless against these chachamim because they were careful not to do things that would make them susceptible to her kishuv. Actually, the chachamim were not always careful about these things because they didn't know these three things make a person able to be makabel the kishuv, but that's why the matronisa spell was effective in immobilizing the boat to begin with. However, once the matronisa said these things, so she assumed that they were careful about these things, and then I guess they learned it from her. Initially, I used to say mitaka or ataka. The reason why you don't eat a vegetable that fell from the table is because it's disgusting. But the rabbit to make a zak mishum the kashal rechapet is because it causes bad breath. I guess when you pick it up with stuff on the floor, it makes bad breath. Abaya says, initially, I used to say that the reason that people shouldn't sit under a drain pipe, meaning the pipe at the end of the gutter through which the water runs to the ground, is because it's wastewater, it's yucky water over there. So if there were different people who were using the roofs for different things, so maybe there were shumutzachs that would flow down through these pipes and would land on his head and it wouldn't be geshmak. So mishum sheichim amlimar bet rabbit megazok, the mishum teshrichim mazikin is because there's a place where the mazikin hang out, so stay away from these things. And this is a big shmuz in Bava Basra. I guess you can take it up with your neighbor when you're trying to figure out the different sheichim situations. There were two schleppers who were carrying a barrel of wine. A bowl is fuche. They wanted to take a rest. They placed the barrel under the drain pipe where a shade or a mazik was sitting. Paka, the mazik made the barrel burst. Also come into Marbaravashi. The schleppers came to Marbaravashi to demand payment from the mazik. He took a shayfers and excommunicated the mazik. It could be that the reason why they did this was a method of summoning the mazik to appear in Bezdin. Also, Marbaravashi could have summoned the mazik using standard procedures, but the mazik didn't appear. And a person who fails to appear in front of Bezdin gets neither, like the Gemara says in Bava Kama, and Kufyud Gimel, and Shulchan Aruch Mishpat Simeon, and it was customary to blow the shofar when they were putting somebody in Cherem or Nidr, like the Gemara says, Markan Tazayin, and in Sanhedrin, side Amud Beis. They took a shofar and excommunicated him. Asla Kamei, the mazik then complied and came before Marbaravashi. Now, the Iyon Yaakov says that he was able to have a sprach with these people, with these mazikim, I should say. He said, why'd you break the barrel? What else should I do? He placed the barrel in my ear as I was sleeping. They didn't see him. So my Rav Ashi said to him, my boys, what are you doing in a place that there's people there? You're the one who's doing shalai kedin. You don't belong there. Like the Gemara says in a lot of places, that mazikim should not be found during the daytime when there's more than 2 people around. More than 1 person around, really. The Mazik says to Mar Rav Ashi, he says, now you said that I'm chayiv, so you have to set a time for me to raise money so I'll be able to pay you on time. Usually you get Shloshim Yom to pay back a chayiv, so that's what he was demanding. Kabbalei Zimna, Mar Rav Ashi agreed to his request and set a time for him. Came out to Zimna Yaakov. When the time came, however, the Mazik stayed away and didn't appear with the money. He also, when he eventually came, Mar Rav Ashi said to him, why didn't you come on time? He said, I couldn't come up with the money for the following reason. Why? Because the money less than anything that's wrapped, sealed, measured, or counted, we're not authorized to partake in. I mean, that's part of why we don't, we're not supposed to count things and these kind of things. Until I can find something that is ownerless, that doesn't have any baila. It's a very, very interesting, fascinating story. Abaye said, I used to say, the reason why people spill water from the pitcher before drinking from it, because there's maybe splinters on the water surface. It's because there are at times harmful waters in the pitcher. At times, a mazik may have drunk from the water in the pitcher and made the water harmful, and spilling out some of the water makes that water harmless. There's a certain mazik who was an attendant in the house of Rav Papa. Also, so he went to bring water from the river. The Akiv, he delayed before returning. He also, when he came with the water, he said to him, why did you come late? He said, I was waiting I was waiting for the harmful waters to pass. Meaning he saw that Mazikim drank from the water, and he was waiting for the harmful waters to pass downstream, so that the water which he would bring back to Rav Papa's household would be safe for their consumption. While he was waiting there, the Mazik saw that they were spilling water from the mouth of the pitcher. He said, had I known that you were accustomed to doing this, I would not have delayed. Because I could have brought you the harmful waters without concern for your safety. Taisus asks that the Mazik should have drawn the harmful waters and spilled some off himself, or notified the people that they should spill off the water before they drank. So Tosis answers that he was afraid that the other Mazik would be upset with him for revealing this secret. But the Gemara speaks out the secret. Also, spilling of the waters means that the water is harmless only for the person who spills it off, and it could still be Mazik others. So even if the Mazik were to notify them about this method, it would still remain a concern for someone else who didn't hear this notification, might drink from that and be harmed. Okay, that was the top of Kuf Amud Aleph. Mir Tashev to be mamshech later with the daf.